the great oxygen crisis goes like this. Once upon a time, there was nothing living on this planet. Nothing. There never had been anything living. This cosmos had gone through over 10 billion years of existence, or roughly 10 billion years of existence, and there had never been a living thing, period. And somehow living things began to assemble themselves on the face of this planet. And they worked in groups, they worked in teams, they were bacterial colonies. One bacterial colony the size of your palm is so thin you can't even see it, even if it's sitting on your palm. But it has more citizens in it than all the human beings who've ever lived on the face of this planet. And they are all communicating with each other. They are all acting as little scouts, communicating information. And they're doing it with a biochemical language, with well, they're doing it with molecules. Um, but the colony, like every kind of metabolism, takes in the things that it has invented a way to use and tosses out the garbage that it hasn't figured out a way to use yet. Remember, everything is something waiting to be used. We just haven't discovered the way to use it yet. Well, these bacteria took in what they had invented incredibly clever ways to use: sunlight, water, stone, sulfur, all kinds of amazing stuff. But they had to shit out what they could not stomach, what they could not handle, what they could not digest, what was a poison to them. And it's a bacterial colony with 7 trillion individuals in it is so small you can't see it, right? It's so thin you can't see it. So what are the farts of 7 trillion bacteria, all farting out what is toxic to their systems, going to accomplish? I mean, it's a very big planet, a very big atmosphere. It's just this tiny little bunch of farting. No one will ever notice, right?
Right.
Wrong.
Wrong.
I mean, it's wrong for roughly the first billion to 2 billion years. But after a while, all those little tiny farts add up. And after somewhere between 1.2 billion and 3 billion years, 2 billion years, whatever it was, I get my billions all confused. But after the first couple of billion years, those farts were a bit too much. And the entire atmosphere was filled with toxic pollutants. We had trashed the atmosphere, and there weren't even any humans around. I mean, there were no exhaust pipes, there were no smokestacks, and we'd already done it for the first time. And the result of that was that amazing mass die-off, that mass murder on Mother Nature's part, that Lynn Margulis and Dorian Sagan were glorying in when they were talking about the Gaia hypothesis. However, a few bacteria worked out a very clever arrangement. There were little tiny bacteria that actually knew how to eat this stuff. They knew how to take the toxic waste and turn it into food and fuel, but they didn't know how to get around. And there were big bacteria that were dying because the toxic waste was absolute poison to them. So the big bacteria basically made a deal with the little bacteria and said, look, we'll carry you around in our systems. We'll handle all your transportation needs. We will make sure that you get all the food that you need to do what you do best, churning this horrible gas, this toxic gas, into food and fuel. You just feed us your shit. Because your shit turns out to be the shit that comes from eating the toxic gas. And for us, it's food. For us, it's the stuff we need to survive. Well, the deal worked out very well, and the result of this combination, of this synergy, is the kinds of cells that you and I have, David. And the little cells that manage to churn this toxic poison into food and fuel are called mitochondria, and they make all of our energy right now. And their ancestors are sitting in your cells and mine making our energy. And do you know what the toxic poison was called that killed off nearly every life form that had ever existed on the planet?
Was that oxygen? Or am I?
Yes.
Yes, I remembered.
Yes, that was oxygen. Is there a lesson in this for humanity? Hey, we're filling the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. Now, we have no idea whether this carbon dioxide is actually causing global warming or not causing global warming. But one way or the other, one thing we know from oil. Why is oil such a terrific fuel? It's carbon. So what's this carbon dioxide stuff? Why are we calling this a toxic effluent? Why are we regarding it as a poison? Why aren't we turning it into fuel? Because we're stupid. However, if bacteria were smart enough to figure out a way to do it, David, would you say that humans are at least sometimes as bright as bacteria?
Probably not. No, I think probably the
Yes.
bacteria are smarter than us a lot of the time.
Well, in reality, because of the way bacteria operate in teams of 7 trillion at a time, they are infernally good research and development machines.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and because they swap information constantly, and at the same time they're swapping information or constantly competing with each other, and because bacterial colonies make war with each other, and because they use chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction when they're making war on each other, and because we've borrowed some of those chemical weapons, we call them antibiotics. We did not invent them. We borrowed them from fungi and bacteria. Um, Bacteria, the combination of cooperation and competition keeps those little bacteria on their toes. That's why they are able to research and develop their way out of just about any drug we throw in their path in 20 years, often faster than we're able to research and develop the next drugs. So they're very smart, but we should be smarter. We have something they don't have. It's called brains, for God's sakes.
yeah.
And, and we have entire communities of brains, and we have innovations, breakthroughs, invention, all kinds of stuff they don't have. And we have a cultural pileup of inventions that go back 2.5 million years to the invention of the first stone tool. And anything bacteria can do, like turning every single toxic pollutant that ever appeared on this planet into some form of food and fuel, anything they can do, we can do better. And they've already taken radioactive, they are living very happily in radioactive pools right now as we are speaking, all over the planet. Why? They've figured out how to live in a radioactive environment. If there's a nuclear war, no problem. Radiodurans bacteria will have a field day, probably eating your corpse and mine, as we lay there glowing in charred ashes. Um, and anything they can do, we can do better. And they can find all kinds of new environments. They're even sitting 2 miles beneath our feet, turning raw granite into bio stuff, into food and fuel right now, even while we're talking, 2 miles
Mhm.
beneath your feet and mine. If they can do that, well, you know, my favorite solution to everything is go to the skies. There are vast amounts of resources floating over our head. They're called asteroids, comets, planets, other solar systems. And we think that life has to be restricted to this tiny little miserable planet, a planet that had so many problems that it's had 142 mass extinctions, again, before there were ever tailpipes of and smokestacks. A planet that has had that just during one short period, 160,000 years or so of human evolution, has had a total of 18 major global warmings. And those global warmings, in most cases, have been global warmings of 18 degrees, gaining 18 degrees in a mere 10 years, which makes anything we've been through look like nothing. It makes, I mean, that was the equivalent of the global warmings that nature has tossed our way, and our way, because we've been around, we've been evolving through all this, we've been figuring out how to outfox all this stuff. Um, and those global warmings were the equivalent of putting an ice cube in your oven. And we've been through 60 glaciations while in the 2.5 million years that we've been evolving, and the 2.5 million years that we invented stone tools. And our ancestors were able to figure out how to live on the edge of glacial sheets. Well, once upon a time, they had a common ancestors with chimpanzees who simply have never been able to do the kind of traveling we were able to do and have never been able to adapt to the cold that we've been able to adapt to it. And we think that right now we're stymied and there's no way we can invent our ways out of our carbon problems except sucking in our gut and denying ourselves all kinds of things. That's ridiculous. So we're,
Now we're getting into book three here
yes,
with
we're in,
Genius of the
yes,
Beast. This is a good transition
right.
because
Because the
now you're
genius
getting
of
into
the beast,
messianic capitalism.
yeah, messianic capitalism says there's a basic underlying imperative of capitalism